Hi everyone, welcome to another remote ROV launch. My name is Emma and I'm going to be navigating you through today's underwater adventure. As opposed to a live ROV launch this year, due to the state of the pandemic, footage was taken by a small team at Supernova on the date of the launch, and I've compiled all the most exciting parts into this video just for you. So if this is your first time watching a launch with us, all the footage has been taken by Supernova's remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, named Polaris, that is an underwater drone. So the video you're going to see today is split up into two different dates, May 3rd, 2021 and March 25th, 2020. All the May 3rd footage is taken at Point Pleasant Park, and the March 25th is from Dartmouth, right beside the McDonald Bridge. So right ahead of you, you see your first little critter. That is a jellyfish, very exciting. And this little guy is actually called a ctenophore, or sometimes even a sea gooseberry. They're very common in Halifax. In fact, the next time you go to the harborfront, you should be able to see a few of these guys hanging out near the surface. And if you do find one when you're swimming, don't worry, they don't have nematocysts, which are the cells that other jellies use to sting you. So instead they have a pair of long retractable tentacles that they use to capture their food. It's pretty cool. And you'll see quite a few of those little jellyfish throughout the video. I'm not going to point everyone out to you, but it's kind of hard to see, so you're going to need to keep your eyes peeled. You might notice that there's a lot of little things floating around through the water, and it's referred to commonly as marine snow. It's made up of mostly organic material, which includes particles of matter from dead animals, phytoplankton, sand, fecal matter, and dust. It's actually a really important part of the biological production and cycling in the ocean. As this marine snow breaks down and sinks, it drives a process called the biological pump and transports nutrients to the deep ocean. You might be wondering why it's so hard to see around this area, and that's just because this area is really polluted, which makes the water a bit murky. But when we get closer to some of the things, you can see them a little bit better. In fact, one thing that you might be able to see right about now is another one of those ctenophores that I mentioned before. You have to look super careful because it's pretty transparent, but don't worry, it's going to come around again in just one second. Yep, there it is on the right side of the screen, kind of in the middle. And here we can see a rare ocean find, the plastic fishing rope. Just kidding. But there it is in the back, you can see it. Actually, as of January last year, it is estimated that in between 46 and 70% of all macroplastic waste in the ocean is fishing gear, which is obviously very harmful to marine life. A lot of the time if fishing gear gets stuck, fishermen will cut it free instead of removing it, so it ends up causing a lot of harm in areas such as this. Another thing you might realize is a big, huge kelp forest, which is very exciting. May not look very interesting, but it is the basis of a very healthy ecosystem. They're very cool and very important. So kelp have three main parts to them. They've got blades, stipes, and holdfasts. So blades are very similar to leaves and are very important for photosynthesis. That's why they're so big. The stipes are the thick stem-like structures that keep the blades supported, and the holdfasts are strong root-like structures that anchor the kelp onto hard surfaces. They're not the same as roots though, because they don't take up nutrients. Their only purpose is to keep that kelp rooted to the ground. If you look super close, you can see a couple of fish flitting around in the bottom right corner right now. But unfortunately, these will be the only fish we'll see in this video, so appreciate them. Do you guys see all that fuzzy stuff on the stipe of that kelp we just passed? That's a type of algae that typically grows in areas of the ocean that are nutrient poor, which is not great news, but also not very surprising considering the amount of pollution that's present in this area. You'll notice that most of this area is dominated by this neon green seaweed. So this is called sea lettuce, and it's part of the green algae family. Very common in Nova Scotia, and fun fact, it is edible. So you can see here that it's attached to the bottom, and it uses a holdfast, very similar to what a kelp uses. But it can also survive free floating in the ocean, which you'll see sometimes as well. So sea lettuce is able to thrive in areas of nutrient pollution, which is an indication of the water quality here. In fact, its growth is often stimulated by pollution and is found in high volumes in areas with a lot of pollution from sewage, which is unfortunate when you think about swimming at Point Pleasant. The other thing you'll notice here is something that looks like a pinky red leafy seaweed. This is also very common, and it's called Irish moss. It's part of the red algae family and is also edible. If you ever see the ingredient carrageenan in your food, that is red algae. It's commonly used as a thickener in a lot of foods and drinks. The other thing you can see here is like a brownish red seaweed, and that's called dulse. Very common. You probably had it before in your life. Also edible and very common in Nova Scotia. And one more thing you might notice, there's a fluffy pink seaweed, and that is called Heterosiphonia japicona. That is a scientific name, but you can just call it red seaweed. It's actually an invasive species. It's originally from the North Pacific Ocean, and it's now become very widespread in the North Atlantic, as you can see here. So invasive species are actually a big problem, and they happen when humans move an organism from its native habitat into an entirely new one. The issue with this is in the new habitat, the organism doesn't have any natural predators, which means that the population can grow out of control and take away food from other resources, take away food and other resources from organisms that are actually native to the habitat. So that's why when an invasive species is introduced, you can find it everywhere. It gets super overgrown. Here on the bottom right, you can see a shrimp, which is so exciting. Oh, we're moving a little bit far away from it now. There we go, just underneath that sea lettuce. This guy is called a northern Atlantic shrimp, and it's not the first one we're going to see here. And here we can see jellyfish number 5 just floating by. And right about here we can see shrimp number 2. You get a really good look at him right now. I'll tell you a little bit more about shrimp. These guys have 10 little appendages, 4 for feeding and 6 for walking, and a tail with fins that are called pleopods that allow them to swim very, very quickly. And you'll see in just a bit he's going to flit away very quickly. But we'll follow him around for a bit and see where he goes. And there is one more shrimp. We just saw him very quickly, but he is a little bit different than the other one. He's a little bit of a gray color, but pretty cool if you saw him. I want you to take a look over to the right side of the screen in just a second, and you will be able to see a frilled anemone. So these little guys are characterized by their cylindrical bodies and tentacles. It's also one of the most common types of sea anemones, and while it may look more like a plant, it's actually an animal. It can move along the sea floor with a petal disc at the bottom of its body, and it eats animals in this area, both living and dead, by using its stinging tentacles to immobilize the prey and bring it to its mouth. Here's one more cool thing. In the middle of the screen, you will see a frilled nudibranch, which is super cool. This little guy is commonly called a sea slug, but like I said, scientifically a nudibranch. They're super cute and really quite pretty, and they come in a whole bunch of different colors, shapes, and sizes. They actually use their colors to their advantage, using a technique called warning coloration, which suggests to predators that they're poisonous. So they're mainly carnivorous and are opportunity scavengers, which means that they feed on almost anything they can find. They're known to eat sea sponges, polyps, barnacles, anemones, and in some cases, other sea slugs. While I was talking about that nudibranch, you might have realized that there's a lot of sea stars in this area, which are also very common in the Halifax intertidal. They belong to the same family as sand dollars and urchins, and they are a keystone predator in the intertidal zone. So they mainly feed on mollusks like clams, oysters, mussels, and snails, which they consume by inserting their whole stomach into the shell and digesting it from the inside. So to avoid being washed out to sea, they use hundreds of tiny feet that are located underneath their arms to cling to surfaces and move across the ocean floor. They also have light-sensitive eye spots on the tips of their arms to help them find food. It's pretty cool. So in this area, you'll see barnacles, blue mussels, and periwinkles, three staples of the intertidal zone as well. So these guys really dominate. You'll see these everywhere you go. And I bet when you've gone to the beach, you can see these both in and out of the water. And I'm wondering if you've ever wondered how they can do that. So it might not look like this, but the intertidal zone is the harshest environment on the planet. And the reason for this is because animals and plants that live here have had to adapt to live in two different extreme environments, both underwater and on the land. So because of this, each of these guys has a few important adaptations that allow them to thrive here. So you might know barnacles as those little cone-shaped white animals that grow on rocks, but actually the only part that's actually alive is a tiny shell in the middle. So these cone shapes are actually made by the barnacle out of a mineral called calcium carbonate. And once they find a spot they like to attach to, they build that little skeleton to keep themselves in place so they don't get washed away by the tide. So when they're out of the water, they're able to hold a tiny bit of water inside their shell to prevent them from drying out. And the blue mussels do the same, but instead of calcium carbonate skeleton, they use these mechanisms called byssal threads to root them to rocks, posts, and the seafloor so they don't get washed away. It's a bit hard to see the threads in these clips here, but I'll show you an example in a couple minutes. So periwinkle snails can also hold water in their shells to keep them moist. They like to wedge themselves into crevices so that when the tide goes out, they can stay in the shade, and when underwater, they're protected from the waves. Right around here you can see something kind of cool. So you can see there's a bit of kelp growing on the bottom here, but you can get a pretty clear shot of the gas bladders that they have to keep them afloat. So basically, all those little bubbles that you see that are kind of a lime green color, a little lighter than the rest of the plant, are filled with air, and they can help the kelp float higher so they're able to photosynthesize. It's pretty cool. So here you can get a nice clear shot of those byssal threads that I was talking about before. So all those thin strands at the end of the mussel are what helps it stay in one place. One other really cool thing you can see here, if you look really closely, is that the mussel shells are cracked and open a tiny little bit with some kind of like filter coming out. That's because they're actually feeding. So mussels are filter feeders, which means that they can filter their food out of the surrounding water. So although you can't see, they're actually feasting on algae, bacteria, and phytoplankton floating around. And I'm really leaving off with a bang here. If you look really closely, just near the bottom of the screen, you can see two nudibranchs. I'm not actually quite sure the species, but they're like a pinky coral color. They've got really cute little spines on them. So yeah, that is the last interesting thing we are going to be able to see today. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to leave any questions or comments you have down below. And also let me know if you spotted anything that I missed. It's entirely possible. So I hope you had fun, and we'll see you next time.